So today I'm going to be sharing with you 3 very powerful speed building techniques that were designed with ghost muting in mind. And I guess it also rhymes. Ever since I put out that ghost muting video, people have been dying for exercises so they can actually practice it and get better at it. And so I took the time to put together a couple of exercises that I personally love and use every single day. I also want to mention that we're going to be taking a pretty deep dive into the technique of ghost muting. So if you're someone who doesn't even know what that is, I'm going to link the original video somewhere for you to check out. And if you want to come back afterwards, that's totally fine. But we're going to be looking at what you should be thinking about, what you should be visually seeing, and also how it should feel to do this properly. And so to get things started, we're going to be jumping in with exercise number 1. Here we go. So one of the things I love about this particular exercise is it allows you to crank up the metronome to really get that picking hand working without sacrificing your fretting hand form. But of course, before we start playing way too fast, and I know that's one of the reasons why a lot of you guys are here, we gotta make sure that we actually have it under our fingers. So it's completely okay to play this very slow and smoothly. Now let's get into how to do this exercise properly and what you should be thinking about while you're playing. So for example, if we're gonna be playing on the low E string, we don't have a lower string than that to mute unless you're on a 7 string. But once we move to the A string, that's when we start to focus on our ghost mute. We want to have the side of our thumb resting on the E string. And as an example, I'm going to try and play and talk at the same time to show you what you're really looking for as I'm playing. So pay attention here. So right here, I'm going to be not ghost muting until I get to the A string. Not ghost muting. Ghost muting starts. Look at the E string. Look at the E string still. So as I'm traveling along, you'll notice all of these strings are moving at the same time, but I'm not actually playing them. That is how you can tell if you are ghost muting properly. And I want to point this out as well too. I'm not pushing forcefully with my palm or thumb into the strings. I had a player ask a question about, does this work with a Floyd Rose? Can I do this with a tremolo or a whammy bar on my guitar? And the answer is yes. If you are pushing so hard that you're pushing your entire guitar out of tune with your tremolo Floyd Rose, then you're pushing way too hard. You do not have to put that much force into muting the notes. Because as we know, to mute a note, all you need to do is lightly touch the strings. That's all you gotta do. And just to prove how lightly I'm actually pressing, I'm not going to use my pick, and I'm gonna perform the motion and show you the strings moving and how light it actually is to the touch. So, if I was to be ghost muting right now with no pick, you'll notice all these other strings in behind are still moving. But I'm not pressing so hard that if I took this hand away, my guitar would do this. If you're pressing this hard, you have to fight against yourself. You're pressing way too hard. And finally, before we move on to the next variation of this exercise, I also want to point out as well too, that I'm not palm muting or using the side of my palm or fingers here to try and mute the notes as we go along. So for example, if I was to play proper ghost muting, it should sound and look like this. Notice that if I was actually palm muting those higher strings, it would sound like this. And obviously that's not what we want. So if your exercises do sound like that, there's a very strong chance that you are using the side of your palm or your pinky and you're muting the notes across the saddle like this. You do not need to do this in order to ghost mute. So now that we have the foundation of what we should and should not be doing when we're trying to perform our ghost mutes properly, let's take a look at exercise number 2. Here we go. So for this exercise, you're gonna notice right away that we're gonna be doing bursts with our picking hand. But where the burst is placed is particularly important. So when we take a look at this exercise, something that we have to point out is where the groups of 3 are actually landing in the sequence. For example, we are not starting with a group of 3. We're not playing this. Because what happens right there is 2 things. You'll be very tempted to start every single sequence with a downstroke, which we are not doing. We are not galloping like it's a metal riff. It's not galloping. But instead, we're going to be starting with an 8th note and then playing the group of 3. And what happens is that triplet or group of 3 lands on the transition from one string to the next. So you have to play that burst of acceleration with your picking hand during an outside pick. It can get a little bit tricky, but once you get it down, this is something that really changed the game for me. Let's just put it that way. So I want you to check out where this burst of acceleration or this group of 3 lands during this transition. Pay attention to this. So we're going to be starting off with a downstroke, and pay attention to where this transition happens. As I go from the E string to the A string, during that triplet or group of 3, that is where the outside pick also occurs. Now, if we start with the group of 3, instead of using the 8th note, pay attention to where the burst of acceleration starts and ends. So if I start here, same thing. Now as I go to the A string, I have that 8th note at the end of the E string. It's a little bit confusing, but now that burst of acceleration to get around the corner is not necessary. If you're playing it like this is incorrect. And lastly, what really makes this a brain twister is that we are still trying to consistently alternate pick. You do not want to reset every single sequence with a new downstroke. So this is what you want to do here. This is what you want. You do not want to do this. In that situation there, every single time I was starting the new sequence, I was starting with a downstroke again, and that completely defeats the purpose. You do not want to do that. Once we have the picking pattern down, now it's time to focus on the ghost mute, because of course still we want to try and keep this clean. And just one side note that I should have mentioned earlier too, because this applies to all the exercises. When we're going through these, if it's really challenging our mind, you're going to see that your fretting hand is going to get a little bit wild, because there's a very strong chance that if you're thinking about the picking pattern and you're thinking about playing evenly and you're thinking about ghost muting, that your fretting hand is going to start to lift off of the fretboard. And of course, we still don't want to sacrifice technique in our fretting hand, because in the long run, obviously this is still going to kill our speed. And so when we're playing through this exercise, we want to avoid this situation right here. I technically still played it correctly, but my hand was a mess. And so instead, we want to try and aim for something that looks more like this. As you can see, my hand is much more relaxed and much closer to the fretboard, and in the long term, this will make me substantially faster. And something you're gonna notice when you're performing this specific exercise is that your mind feels pretty open and pretty clear. You have the ability to focus on a lot of things at once because you're not trying to rush across the neck. Rather, all of your speed, or most of your speed, is coming from your picking hand, which gives you a lot more time to really calibrate and understand what's going on in your fretting hand. And this allows you to play at a pretty high BPM and really get those bursts flying with your picking hand while also keeping your fretting hand very close to the fretboard. You'd be surprised at how much control you feel like you actually have when you're doing this. And one last tip before we get to the final exercise is when you're transitioning from one finger to the next, try to keep that super laser focused and clean. You don't want to have hammer-ons in between each group of 3. So instead of having this, of course, we want this. Now it's time for exercise number 3. Here we go. Now this exercise might be the holy grail of speed training, and here's why. In this exercise, we're going to be doing bursts with our picking, bursts with our fretting hand, and also doing a silent burst with an outside pick to get ready for a pick plant on the next string. It's kind of a mouthful, but let's break it down. So the one thing you might have caught, because we haven't talked about this yet, is pick planting. What is that? Essentially, once we play our first 3 notes, we're going to be setting up for the next 3 notes before they are played, aka planting our pick on the next string and getting it ready in advance. So I'm going to show you what a pick plant looks like and also what you should not be doing as well too. So first, when you're picking the first 3 notes, during that pause, because if you notice we're playing quite staccato and there are some rests in this example or in this exercise, when we play the first 3 notes, during that pause, we do not want to float in the air, but rather we want to try to do our outside pick and hook it onto the upstroke position of the A string. Something like this. Now, I haven't played anything, but I'm planting my pick on the A string, so when it's time to play the next set of notes, I'm able to do it instantly and cleanly. Now what you don't want to do is have your pick floating above the strings or in between the strings during the rest. So for example, this is what you do not want to do. And if I keep my pick in the air like this, before I can play the A string, I have to close the gap and bring my pick to the string and then play. And when you're playing at very low tempos, you might never notice that this is even a problem. But once you start to speed up, this is how you start to have those double notes, because you're touching the string and you're getting a harmonic, or you're playing the note and then you're picking it again, especially when you're playing fast, and that is where things get very sloppy. So we want to pick plant in advance after every single outside pick. So notice that during the rest period, I'm planting my pick and getting it ready to go for when I have to play again. I'm never having it float in the air, and this will save you so much time and also frustration, because if you try and do this the other way and you skip this step, once you speed up, it's gonna fall apart. So when we play on the last string, you're gonna notice that we finish on an upstroke, but we're not going here for our pick plant, rather we're going to go here, so in the same spot again, so it looks like this. Also, and this is one of the rare exceptions to ghost muting, in this situation here, I'm actually catching the string with the side of my thumb right here, so I don't get a squeak or a harmonic or a pick sound or an open string, like that. So in this one situation, we're gonna make an exception, and for the ghost mute, we're gonna be doing it way up here, which is much closer to a pinch harmonic, but it should look and sound something like this. Because if we try to do this exact same motion and stop the string from vibrating with our pick, we're gonna get a sound that sounds like this. And of course, that ringing sound is not what we want. So instead, we're gonna use the side of our thumb to mute that, play as clean as possible, and then continue back down the scale. And that is exactly how you should be practicing this exercise. I recommend practicing each of these exercises for 1 to 2 minutes of effort, followed by 2 or 3 minutes of rest period, or whatever you see fit. And to reiterate it one last time, the whole point of these exercises is to play as clean as possible with speed, not one or the other. You want to make sure that those bursts are super clean, you're landing your ghost mute so you don't have any harmonics or open string notes, and trust me, you're going to be flying in no time. And just in case somehow you watched this entire video and you still don't know what a ghost mute is, check out this video right here.